Hi, my name is Bridget Richardson. I'm the Assistant Director of Ecumenical and Pastoral Initiatives with the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture at University of St. Thomas in Houston. And I'm here with my good friend and cohort. We were in the same cohort, my cohort partner, Theresa Price. She's an alumna of the Master of Arts in Faith and Culture program. So Theresa, thank you for this conversation today.
I'm so happy to be here, and I treasure the cohort that we started with because we all finished, and that cohort, as well as everyone else in the program, just was one of the most beautiful fruits of the program for me.
Yeah, I agree. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your faith life before, and then how you found out about the Master of Arts in Faith and Culture program.
My faith life before is typical of any born and raised Catholic schools through high school. Really never wavered on my faith. Really never had a serious challenge to my faith. And then got married, and my husband became a Catholic of his own accord. Honestly, no push from me. That's the honest truth. At one point when he said he wanted to go through RCIA, I was excited, and I said, what brought you to that? And he said, I want to have what you have, just a deep core of faith. And then we raised our kids, and same thing, Catholic schools through high school. And as my youngest was going into high school, I was just looking for a challenge and a new chapter. Considered going back to work, and considered several master's programs, one including the Rice University Master of Liberal Arts. But I happened upon an ad for the MAFC program in the Texas Catholic Herald, and so I was intrigued just by the title of the program, Master of Arts in Faith and Culture. And then I went to an open house and was more deeply intrigued, but still not convinced that that's where I was supposed to be. And then by happenstance, I met the author of Virtuous Leadership, and his name is Alexandra Havard. And as I talked to him, again, this was pure happenstance that I met him, he said so many things that resonated with what I had just heard 2 days earlier in the Faith and Culture open house, to the point where I felt like the Holy Spirit was flashing a red arrow saying, girl, get yourself to that center, because that's where you belong. And so I enrolled, and it is truly transformative. Yeah.
And Theresa just shared that experience with me, that she met Alexander Havard. And this book, this one right here, Virtuous Leadership, it's incredible. And I'm still floored that you met him, but that goes into the courses that we studied and the books that we read. So can you share a little bit about how that just enriched your faith life, your intellect, everything like that?
Yeah, so we'll start with that. So the Virtuous Leadership we read in Christian leadership, and that was one of the core classes. And, that class, I won't say it was my favorite class. I did love it, but it was instrumental in me understanding that I was called to lead, that all of us are called to lead. And that's due to our magnanimity, is understanding the greatness within, because we are simply creatures of God. And that we are called to be bold and fearless leaders in the love of Christ. And of course, the other side of that is humility, that we are called to see and serve God and everyone else. We are called to love the greatness in everything and everyone. So that Virtuous Leadership is part of that Christian leadership class, which was mind-blowing. And then the other 3 classes, I don't even know how to say how impactful they were, but like Faith in the Dominant American Culture, fundamental to the program, of course, is how do we live this dual citizenship between being a citizen of the kingdom of God and a citizen of the world? How do we live as Americans but live the gospel truth? And again, that honestly goes back to love and to magnanimity and humility and developing the virtues that we need to be active and engaged civically, but to always have the voice of the gospel. And then, of course, that leads right into virtues. And, our country was founded on the belief that we are obligated to be engaged civically. So civic virtues of courage and responsibility and, care of others. But we also have our Christian, our God-given virtues that we have to develop as habits of the heart. So again, we're balancing gospel and the American way of life. And then what's the other one? What's our other fourth one? Virtues, Christian leadership,
Christian spirituality.
Christian spirituality. Ooh, how can I forget that? It is enough to be a creature. God meets us where we are. Again, that's all based on relational living. It requires our assent that we must receive. We must empty ourselves in order to receive, that we must assent to the yes, Lord, what would you have me do? But again, doing it as a Christian, but also doing it day to day in our lives as Americans. So, it goes back to, on the one hand, as Americans, we are self-made men and we are individuals and we have the freedom, but the freedom we know in the gospel, the freedom comes because we know who we are. And as my friend Butch Caligari liked to say, going through this program, invariably you get asked the question, what are you going to do with that? And my first response was always, well, I'm going to be a better person. And then I'm going to make my family a little bit better. And then I'm going to make my community a little bit better. But Butch had the best response I've ever heard, which was, it's not what am I going to do with this, it's who I'm going to be. Who am I going to be? And for me, that meant it's a constant journey of transformation, created in the image of God, but growing into the likeness of Christ and doing that in every encounter.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. And Butch, he was our classmate, a dear friend, and he does put things very succinctly and beautifully. It must be the lawyer in him, right?
Right.
But I want to ask you, Theresa, there's something that I'll never forget that you said in one of our classes, and it was in the Christian spirituality course. You were talking to Father Nesti, and you were talking about watching the news. And you said, Father Nesti, sometimes when I watch the news, I just get emotionally drained. Like it hurts me to watch this unfold and to see what's happening in the world. So what do I do when I feel that way every single time I watch the news? And Father Nesti said something that I'm still unpacking till this day. He said, blessed are those who mourn. Yeah. So how do you see that still being a part of the way that you interact with the world around you, knowing what you learned in the program and knowing about what the world is going through in a lot of different ways?
Well, I'm going to give you another Father Nesti right back at you, because one of the first things I remember him saying, I had met him only very briefly before I went to the first student retreat that kicks off every school year. And what he said, let me think so I get it right. He said, if the evangelizer is not filled with the life and love of Jesus, he will never overcome the sadness in this world. And honestly, I carry that with me every single day. That is the truth. And it's a constant reminder to myself that we have joy in the gospel, and we have joy in the love of Christ. We do encounter sadness more and more. It seems it just gets heavier and heavier and heavier, and we certainly all suffer. But I am reminded that of what Father Nesti said, we must be filled with the life and love of Jesus. And it also leads me to a point, kind of somebody else, Father Vince, who is associated with the program, but never went through he went to Rome with us when we did our ecumenism class in Rome. And he always reminds me and all of us that one of the best ways we evangelize is through attraction. And that attraction comes from a just bone deep inherent joy that we are created in the image of God, and so are you. And there is beauty and love and redemption available for everyone. So I don't know if that answered your question, but on the work I do is in the Third Ward, and that has been the crux of a lot of attention after George Floyd's murder. But even before then, I mean, day to day, to see people who are just simply born into a world of fewer opportunities than most of us, well, most people I know. That's the only way that I can reconcile how somebody is born into this circumstances, yet the rest of us get these awesome opportunities, is to understand that we can only solve this through love. And I'm not talking about Hallmark love. I'm talking about the love that requires us to act. I always feel like the Imago Dei, the image of God, is a call to action. That for the mere fact that God created you or this world demands our service and our love.
That's very beautifully put. And can you describe a little bit about your work and what you do?
Yeah, so when I was doing my practicum with the MAFC, I started with I was participating in a conference that Catholic Charities does every year, and it's called No Poverty, and No is KNOW. And it brings together organizations and individuals who are addressing the ills and adverse effects of poverty in Houston. So that was, I honestly just sort of dipped my toe into it just to spark some. I knew I wanted to focus on inequity in Houston, and I knew I wanted it to be a very personal kind of practicum. So within that conference, I met an organization called Generation One, and Generation One works to fight inequity in education. And the organization is in the Third Ward and serves the community of the Third Ward with early education, so 2-year-olds to 5-year-olds, and then an after-school program for kindergarten through 8th grade. And along with the early education center and the after-school program, we have therapy and counseling services for the children and the families. And so it all started with my practicum in my MAFC. I was a volunteer for a number of years with them. Following my practicum, I stayed with them as a volunteer, and now I actually work for them part-time, raising money for Generation One. But it all started with my practicum, and my one of the very first classes we took together, Bridget. I think it was the mission of the church.
Yeah, with
Or maybe it was anthropology. It might have been anthropology, eschatology. But I remember the very first day going in there, and Dr. Meyer was talking about Imago Dei, and that just stayed with me through the whole program. And I've always known that we're all created in the image of God, but I remember him putting it in the context of it was a call to action, not just a theology and a beautiful thing to believe, but it requires us to serve and to lead and to love.
Yeah, and in doing that, you and I have talked about the cohort and the beauty of the relationships formed. And you went to Rome, which is even, a step further in forming those relationships. So can you talk about the relationships within the program, going to Rome, and then how you felt the encouragement from your peers to go and be that action in the world?
So as I said before, I was really looking for a challenge in my life. I was looking for, a new chapter. I was looking for just intellectual enrichment. But what I got were just beautiful solid friendships. And it started with our cohort, who awesome. It was you and Raina and Deacon Philip and me and Eric and Matt. And woo! And that little group was a little seed for me. I took most of my classes with you and Raina and Matt and Eric, and the nighttime classes with Deacon Philip. And it was just fundamental to support. And I found a lot of the classes super challenging. The very first class I ever went to was with Dr. Meyer at the seminary, and you were in that class. Literally wrote down 10 or 12 words that he said that I didn't know the meaning of. Yeah. So I had to go home and look up all those words. And I was like, oh my God. But just so our cohort, was that little group, but it grew because to a person, the people in the classes, our classes are so engaged, and there are so many questions asked and so many questions answered and so many questions that may never be answered. I remember another father, Nesti, said, embrace the mystery. If you teach your children anything, teach them to embrace the mystery. There are some things that we will never understand, but embrace it as a God-given mystery. So beyond our cohort, I honestly looked forward to going to classes, if only to see the people who I was growing to love. And then going to Rome. Actually, I went to Rome and I didn't know anybody on the trip. Turned out I knew Larry Balsam because he's my cousin. I didn't even know he was going to be on the trip. But I mentioned Father Vince before, and what a treasure he is in my life. He is just a man of full, complete, joyful obedience to God's call. And I met Nora and Nancy and Joanne, and got to be much closer to Jan and Father Nesti. It was 3 weeks in Rome at the Centro Pro Unione, and it's all about ecumenism and interreligious dialogue. And the class is compelling and so important. And it's something I really didn't give any mind to tell you the truth, prior to being there. But the notion that there are a gazillion Christian denominations, and Jesus did not come and form us as a church to have us fractured. So, as we all know, he prayed that all may be one, and that's what ecumenism is working towards. So it really, I learned way more than I ever expected to learn, and I was more engaged than I anticipated. I mean, heck, I was going to Rome, so I was excited about that. But the class was fantastic, and I really appreciated even the discussions on interreligious dialogue. I mean, that's the world we live in, and to dismiss people of other faiths is to dismiss a great majority of the world and a great majority of God's creatures. So the Rome experience was unbelievable, and I feel so blessed to have been part of it. And as I said before, I'm about to say something I might have to retract, but I consider the people I met in the Master of Art in Faith and Culture as, if not the best part of the program for me, certainly way up there. They are, they have enriched my life in ways I can't even explain.
I agree. And, thank you for sharing so openly about Rome and the relationships, because I think that's, that's something that we learn in the program, is that, yes, we're taking these courses and we're coming to this deeper understanding, but to understand ourselves with regard to who we are with relationship to God, the world around us, it can completely change everything about what you know or what you thought you know. So, and you're still very active with the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture on the advisory board. Anytime we need help, we can call on Theresa.
Please, anytime.
So what would you say to someone who is thinking about the program, not quite sure if it's for them, almost like how you were previously,
Right.
but just to take that leap, to give it a try, to have maybe this transformation of heart that you've experienced?
I feel like if you have this much interest in it, you need to get in it, because you will be eternally grateful. I felt then, and still feel, such a renewed sense of humility and duty. And I use those words in the best sense, that it is because of this program that I'm certainly more engaged as a person with my family and with my friends, but also with the community where I'm working, and I hope on a day-to-day basis with every encounter. I have such a sense of gratitude and blessing having gone through this program. And if you have just the least speck of interest, I'd say do it, because that's the Holy Spirit planting a little seed.
Well, thank you so much, Theresa. And I always enjoy talking to you. You know,
I love talking to you.
Much. And I feel like you've gone through so much when you've been through this program with someone, and it's just a joy to, speak this type of language with someone who knows your heart so well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I think the world of you. You know that. I think you're precious. And yeah, listen, if anybody wants to call me, I'll have a one-on-one with people.
There you go. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Theresa.
Thank you.